Hey everybody, hope everybody is well. Happy Wednesday for those that are live. Today is actually the fast of Esther for those that are celebrating. It commemorates the time in which the queen of Persia at the time, the story of Purim, Jews were decreed by the evil Haman to be destroyed, and Esther walked into the king's chamber uninvited, which was a penalty that was death. And she fasted for 3 days to prepare herself for divine intervention, and so we fast along with her to remember those times, and to remember that there's always a moment for divine intervention, to reflect on ways to get better. This actually is a real day of reflection. We're talking about this the whole time. We've been talking about reflection. Fasting is really an exercise of reflection. Your day is different. You don't have the normal day. You feel the hunger. You remind yourself of the things that you could have done better. And that's that way of reflecting, of growing, of being better is what leads to salvations. And so tomorrow, the holiday of Purim, comes on purpose, right after the day in which you fast. Because the reflection, the growth is what leads to the greatness. We've been talking about this idea of empathy, of understanding somebody else, of taking the time in our reflective moments, not just think about ways that we could be more, what we could have done better. That's definitely important. But to use a very specific tool during these moments to say to ourselves, what did we learn about the other? Many times when you're in a conversation with somebody, you learn things about them, but in the conversation, you're too busy having the conversation that you don't catch it, you don't keep it. That's where reflection is so powerful. You look back and go, what were they thinking? What did I miss? What did I learn? Was I off here? Was I off here? Did I assume this? Did I assume that? Did I assume that they were less sensitive than maybe they just didn't know? Is my own sensitivities or insecurities projecting on other people? Did I give them the right level of benefit of the doubt? How many times have you heard that before? How many times have you seen that in your life? Where you're talking to somebody and you assumed something, and then you found out in the conversation that they had no idea, or they did something totally different, or there's a real reason why they didn't do that, or do this, or do that, or do that, whatever it is. And you learned, holy cow, I was wrong. Well, if you don't have a moment to reflect on that and go, wait, the next time I'm in this scenario, slow down. I don't know everything. Maybe the person is A, B, or maybe I should just give them the benefit of the doubt. Maybe I should ask before I judge. You learn about what people thinking about, what they're worried about, what they're trying to control, what they're trying to figure out, which may not be a concern of yours. You learn about someone else's anxieties, someone else's insecurities, someone else's history. Someone else may have a very specific fear of something because of their upbringing, which has nothing to do with you, because you're a different person with a different upbringing. Someone may have the responsibility that you don't have, and so they have to worry about the thing that you don't have to worry about. Someone may have to go to an office or a classroom, and they're threatened, and you don't get to go to that office, or you don't got to be in that classroom. So you're like, come on, just do this, but it's not so easy. There's so many things we can learn from other people. There's so many things we can learn from how they think and naturally, and how they think in their histories and their nurture and their nature, that if we would pause in our moments of reflection in the time infrastructure and just think about our day, think about our week, and think about where we were off in our interactions, we would learn so much more. We would learn so much more about other. We would be so much less offended. We would be so much more impactful. We take things for granted a lot. We take knowledge for granted a lot. We assume that other people know what we know. Remember as a kid growing up, you ever play the game charades? You ever play charades growing up? Where somebody gets you know, a word or a phrase or an expression, and they have to like act it out to the other person. If you ever watch people play charades, try to, if you can figure out how to do this, play charades with people and watch how frustrated the person gets when the other person has no idea what's going on. Like they're like acting out like a house and a fence, and the other person has no idea what they're talking about, and they're like frustrated, like and the guy's like, I had a pancake, like I don't know what you're talking about, and the guy's like, right, and like you could see how frustrated they get because in that person's mind, like my hand motions is a house and a fence, but the other person is like, I'm not in your head. I don't have your information. I don't know what you're talking about. But that person is so frustrated because it is such a common bias to think that if I know it, then you should know it. So like my little hand motions is clearly a house because I, in my head, think house. I studied this before, so you must know it too. I use words that you may not fully understand. I assume that you've already gotten this when you haven't. So much of our days, really we could be so much more powerful, so much more effective. And all it takes is a little reflection. I'm not talking about like a PhD in like, CIA techniques of like reading someone's mind. We're talking about basic stuff. Take a few moments out of our day to review that which I just experienced, and instead of it just being like all over the place, with a deliberate focus on trying to understand somebody else's mind a little bit more than I did before. Getting 5% more understanding of what's going on in the mind of another. Thinking about what you thought before the conversation and what you learned at the conversation, so that when you leave, you see where you're off. Using moments to understand somebody else. And by the way, as it always works out, since today is the fast of Esther, that's why Esther was awesome. Right? What Esther did was she actually played the king Achashverosh against the evil Haman, saving the Jewish people, because she knew the king was very, very sensitive. He was insecure. If you remember the story of Achashverosh, those who know the story, Achashverosh was the king of the Persia and Medes Empire. And he rose to power, ultimately amassing an enormous amount of countries. But he was a stable boy, and he was always insecure. When Esther invited him to a banquet with him, and the evil Haman, it played to his insecurities. Why would she need the three of us? What does Haman have over me? Why not the two of us? And that insecurities began a whole snowball effect of him basically leading to events which ultimately led in the second banquet to him killing Haman, overturning to some extent the decree, and ultimately saving the Jewish people. She thought about making the case to defend her people, not from her perspective. She thought about it from their perspective, and she actually played both men against each other brilliantly. Haman wanted nothing more than power, and she gave it to him in a private meeting with her and the king, which led him to be a little bit too confident, which led to his demise. Achashverosh was insecure, and so by putting him in that situation, played his insecurities. She literally played them both based on how they thought about it. Just to be able to use as it's an amazing thing if you know the story. If not, look into it. It's unbelievable how she was so intuitive to the minds of another. I'm not suggesting doing it for the same reasons. You may not have to have to defend an entire nation. It may just be to build a stronger relationship in something. But reflection and thinking and putting yourself in someone else's shoes and coming out of meetings and saying, what did I miss? And learning someone else's languages and trying to see where someone else has gaps in information that you don't. When you take your reflection moments, in part, we'll talk about other ways to do it next week, but in part, and use it to fill in the gaps of your knowledge of somebody else, you gain an incredible amount of insight, which makes you incredibly more impactful. Because now you see someone else's perspective, which gives you greater ability to make solutions that work for more than one people. Because usually the greatest solutions are one or two layers underneath the solutions that you have right now that solve everybody's problems. Because you just understand them deeper and you understand you deeper. And so you're able to put forth things that hit multiple perspectives because you're the only one in the room thinking about somebody else at a level that is more than just how do I get something from them or convince them of what's in my head. That reflection based on empathy is incredibly powerful. All right. We'll pick this up next week. For those that are observing, happy holiday. It's an incredible time. Take advantage of it. Deepen your relationship with this, what's behind the surface of the world. The whole story of Purim is about masks and dressing up to show us that everything is just dressed up, but behind the scenes, God is pulling the strings. With God's help, enjoy. Have a great weekend. With God's help, I can't wait to see you next week.
Living on a lifeline, the world doesn't ever seem to change. Looking for the sunshine, but you're caught up in the rain. It's like your eyes are wide open, but you cannot see. You're watching life pass you by like 1, 2, 3. Walking in destruction, the winds of life blur your vision. All the devastation forever feels like you're on the run. It's time. No one else can set you free, you're locked inside, and only you have got the key.